Note, you do not have to watch the entire video, just go to the questions that you need help with. I haven't made a video in a while, so I apologize that some of the technology was not perfect. What's up guys, it's Dr. Verma. This video is the review for our first test, which is going to be on ratios. And before we begin, I just want to repeat what I said in class, which is that this practice test has all the same questions that are going to be on the real test, but the only difference is that I changed up the numbers a little bit, okay? And before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell notification so that when I post future reviews, you'll get a notification. Here we go. So the first question says, the table below shows the number of tea bags needed to make different amounts of iced tea. What is the total number of quarts of iced tea that can be made with 18 tea bags? So we have a ratio table. And what I'm going to ask myself is, what is the relationship between the two quantities? The two quantities are the number of tea bags and the total quarts of iced tea. So I'm seeing that when there's 6 tea bags, there's 3 quarts of iced tea. I'm seeing when there's 12 tea bags, there's 6 quarts of iced tea. When there's 18 tea bags, we need to figure out how many quarts of iced tea there are. And when there's 24 tea bags, we need to figure out, when there's 24 tea bags, there's 12 quarts of iced tea. So I'm going to try to figure out what's the relationship between 6 and 3. How do I get from 6 to 3? And I know that to get from 6 to 3, I have to divide by 2. Because 6 divided by 2 gets me 3. Now I have to ask myself, what's the relationship between 12 and 6? What do I have to do to the 12 to get 6? And to get 6 from 12, I have to divide by 2. And I'm going to skip this row real quick because that's what we have to figure out. And I want to make sure that I'm correct, that the pattern I noticed of dividing by 2, if that is truly the correct relationship. So to go from 24 to 12, I have to divide by 2. So that means my pattern is dividing by 2 to get from the first quantity, which is the number of tea bags, to get to the second quantity, which is the total quarts of iced tea. So 18 divided by 2 is the same thing as blank, the mystery number, times 2 equals 18. And the answer in this case would be 9, because 18 divided by 2 would be 9. But we're not just going to stop there. We always need to put our units. So the units is going to be quarts. So 9 quarts. And I could do 9 quarts of iced tea, but it's not easy writing on Zoom. Okay, so that is how we would solve this problem. We're going to go ahead and go to the next one. Here we go. And let me clear all drawings. Okay. So number 2 says, choose all the values of A that make the statement true. Now, I want to make sure that we all remember what A is. A is a number, a letter that represents a number. And let's see who remembers what that's called. And if you said variable, you are correct. A variable is a letter that represents a number. And writing on Zoom is not a lot of fun, guys. So the ratio we have is 3 to 9. And then the other ratio we have, which we know is equivalent, is A to 36. So obviously I can't multiply 3 by anything or divide 3 by anything to get A, because we don't know what A is. So I'm going to ask myself, what do I do to the 9 to get 36? So I know my 9 times table says that 9 times 4 equals 36. So that means whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do the top quantities as well. 3 times 4 will get me 12. So I know that A is equal to 12. And so I see that's answer choice C. But I remember when I saw the question, it stated to choose all the values. Oftentimes, I mean, I would say all the time, but I don't want to be wrong. So I'll say oftentimes, or most of the time when we see choose all the values, that means there's going to be more than one answer. So obviously the answer can't be 10 or 11 because the answer is 12. Let's take a look at 36 over 3. So we know from fifth grade that 36 over 3 can actually be written as 36 divided by 3. And 36 divided by 3 is the same thing as asking ourselves what times 3 gets us 36, because division and multiplication are inverse operations. So 36 divided by 3 or blank times 3 equals 36. Our answer would be 12. So we know that 36 thirds and 12 are the same thing. So when I choose all the answers, I'd actually have to choose C and I'd have to choose D for this particular answer or this particular question. Let's go on to number 3. Okay, which ratio is in the simplest form? So in order to simplify ratios, what I need to ask myself is when I look at both of the quantities, right? What can I divide both of those quantities by to get a quantity that I cannot divide any longer? So it says which ratio is in the simplest form of 9 to 27. So the ratio 9 to 27 can be simplified, which means I can divide both of these two terms by the same number and get an even smaller number. So when I look at 9 and 27, I know in my times table that both 9 and 27 are factors of, are multiples of 3, which means they can both be divided by 3. 9 divided by 3 gets me 3. 27 divided by 3 gets me 9. And then I'm going to ask myself, can I take 3 and 9 and can I divide both of those numbers by the same number and get an even smaller number? And the answer to that is yes. I can divide both 3 and 9 by 3. So 3 divided by 3 will get me 1. And then 9 divided by 3 will get me 3. And then I'm going to ask myself once more, can I divide the terms 1 and 3 by the same number to get an even smaller or a lesser value? And in this case, I cannot. And usually when we see a 1, we know we can't divide any further. So 1 to 3 is going to be my ratio in simplest form, which is answer choice B. And I also want to state that there's another way to do this. So I'm going to start off with the ratio 9 to 27, and we need to simplify that. So I noticed that I could divide both 9 and 27 by 3, which I did. And then I noticed that I could divide 3 and 9 both by 3 again, which I did. And then it was simplified. But I also know that 9 and 27 are both multiples of 9, which means I can divide 9. Oops. I can divide 9 by 9. I can divide 27 by 9 as well. And when I do that, 9 divided by 9 gets me 1. 27 divided by 9 gets me 3. Now, the second way is more efficient, but either way is acceptable. As long as you get the right answer of 1 to 3, it doesn't matter if you have to do like an extra step like I did when I did it the first time, or if I can just go straight down and simplify it by using one number. So let's go on to number 4. It says Cortez Adams has 10 teaspoons of salt. The ratio of teaspoons to tablespoons is 5 to 3. How many tablespoons of salt does Cortez Adams have? So the first thing I have to ask myself is, in this ratio problem, what are my two quantities? My two quantities are teaspoons and tablespoons. Teaspoons to tablespoons. So I'm going to go ahead and let me move it over a little bit. I'm going to label one side teaspoons, and I'm going to label the other side tablespoons. And according to the problem, the ratio of these two quantities is 5 to 3. So for every 5 teaspoons, I have to have 3 tablespoons. And then it says Cortez Adams has 10 teaspoons of salt. So I know from the problem that he has 10 teaspoons of salt. So I'm going to put that under the side that has teaspoons. And then the question is, how many tablespoons of salt does he have? So that's what I need to figure out. And we use variables in the previous problems, so in class and today. So I'm going to use the variable m. So we need to figure out what m is, which is going to be the amount of tablespoons, excuse me, when he has 10 teaspoons. Okay. So I'm going to ask myself, how did I get from 5 to 10? If you said you add 5, that's true, but we're in middle school and we want to use multiplication and division as much as possible. So I'm going to multiply 5 by 2, and that gets me 10. And whatever I do to one side of the ratio, I have to do to the other side as well, to the other quantity. So I'm going to multiply by 2. And when I multiply 3 by 2, I get 6. So m is equal to 6. 6 tablespoons. So there's multiple ways that we can do this kind of problem, right? So this way was just by writing ratios. We could have also technically made this a table, right? Could have looked something like this without the ratio colons. And if it was a table, it would look something like this. But I also want to go over 2 of the other strategies that we've learned, one of which was using tape diagrams. So let me change the color. I'll use yellow. So it says the ratio of teaspoons. Oh, that yellow looks terrible. So let me change it to this color. I think this is a little bit better. So teaspoons and tablespoons. So the ratio is 5 to 3. So that means I'm going to draw 5 pieces of tape. 3, 4, 5. And remember, I'm not a robot, so even though the tape pieces may not look equal, they are equal, I promise. And then the ratio of teaspoons to tablespoons is 5 to 3. So I'm going to go ahead and now draw the 3 tablespoons. Okay? The 3 tapes next to tablespoons. And the problem also tells us that Cortez has 10 teaspoons of salt. So I'm going to ignore the tablespoons and I'm only going to focus on the teaspoons. Okay? And what I know is that these, oh, I was able to do the squiggly on the computer. These 5 pieces of tape equal 10. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of tape, 5 times what will get me 10? That's 2. So each of these little pieces of tape equals 2. Because I have 10 teaspoons of salt and the ratio or the tape diagram has 5 pieces and those 5 pieces need to equal the 10. And since each of the pieces of tape are equal, I also know that the pieces of tape that go next to the tablespoons will also be 2. So now if the question's asking how many tablespoons of salt I have, I can either add the 3 pieces of tape together and next to tablespoons, which would be 2 plus 2 plus 2, and I can get 6. Or I see that I have 2 3 times, which gives me the number sentence 3 times 2, which equals 6. And yes, we can add them together, like I said, but it's middle school. We really want to try to multiply as much as we can when we're doing problems that give us the option to either multiply or add. And then, so this is another strategy. This is using tape diagrams. And the third strategy that we used, or that we learned rather, was using a double number line. So double means 2. So I'm going to draw 2 number lines. Okay. And remember, anytime we draw any pictures, we must label. If you don't label, you will lose points because I'm not going to try to play I Spy or look for, what you tried to do or what you didn't try to do. If it's labeled, it's easier for me to find the mistake and give you partial credit as opposed to, looking through like work that's not labeled. So I'm going to label this first line, this first number line, excuse me, teaspoons. That P looks bad. And then I'm going to label this second number line tablespoons. Okay, so now when we use a number line, we're actually plotting the values from the ratio. So it says the ratio of teaspoons to tablespoons is 5:3. I'm going to go ahead and plot 5 for teaspoons and 3 for tablespoons. And then it says in the beginning that Cortez Adams has 10 teaspoons of salt. So I'm going to go ahead and plot that 10. And we're trying to figure out how many tablespoons of salt he has. So for this one, I'll make my variable R, okay? And I'm going to ask myself, how did I get from 5 to 10? To get from 5 to 10, I multiplied by 2. And if I did that to the first number line, I got to treat everything the same. I'm going to do that to the bottom number line, to the other quantity of my ratio. So 5 times 2 got me 10. We multiply by 2 on the bottom. 3 times 2 is 6. So my variable R is 6 tablespoons. And I want to point out a couple of things. Like I said before, I labeled my number lines and I also put the units next to my answer. So when I have 6, I don't have to know or guess, is it 6 people, $6, 6 tablespoons, because if you or teaspoons, because if you said 6 teaspoons, you'd be wrong. So if I label it as 6 teaspoons, and when I circle my answer, it's easier for me to grade and to give you guys the most amount of points possible. Okay, so on the test, obviously this is multiple choice. I'd like for you to show your work. You don't need to use all 3 strategies, but I know different people like different strategies, which is why I just did this problem in all 3 different ways. So we're going to go on to number 5, excuse me. A bakery made 2 cakes using 6 bags of flour. Let me get the color. Okay. The bakery uses the same relationship between cakes made and the amount of flour used to make all of their cakes. Which table of values shows the relationship between the number of cakes the bakery makes to the number of bags of flour the bakery uses? Now, this problem is not the best example for what's going to be on the test, because when I changed the numbers around, I realized that they were trying to trick you in the problem, right, with the actual numbers. But when I changed the numbers around, there really isn't much tricking being done. So what I will say is that the order matters in a ratio, right? Just like I always say in the classroom, when you are putting your clothes on in the morning, you got to put your underwears or your drawers on first, and then you put your pants on. You can't put your pants on and then your drawers, because that's the wrong order. So here it says a bakery made 2 cakes using 6 bags of, let me do it like this, 2 cakes using 6 bags of flour. So what that means is that every time you have 2 cakes, for every 2 cakes made, 6 bags of flour was used. And let me label it cakes and flour. And labeling it doesn't mean you have to write out the word cakes or the word flour. CNF is going to be okay. I know how to spell cakes. I know how to spell flowers. I know what the first letter of both those words are. So the ratio of cakes to flours is 2 to 6. If I said the ratio was 6 to 2, that would be wrong. And quite honestly, I wouldn't be able to make 6 cakes out of 2 bags of flour according to this problem. I need 6 bags of flour to make 2 pieces of cake, or two cakes, 2 whole cakes, I guess. And when I look at the tables, right, I see these ratio tables are labeled, which is great. Cakes, bags of flour. And I'm going to look at this one. I see the 2 and the 6, and I see that the 2 is associated with the quantity cakes, and I see that the number 6 is associated with the quantity flour. So that means that this is the correct ratio. However, I'll take a look at why B is wrong. Cakes, bag of flour. The 6 is associated with the cakes, which is wrong, because it's 2 cakes that's made. And the 2 is associated with the bags of flour, which is wrong, because it says 6 bags of flour. So order is important. When it's out of order, your answer is going to be wrong. So make sure that when you're writing it, make sure that when you're labeling your work, you're labeling it based on the order of the ratio. Okay? Let me clear. Now we're going to move on to number 6. It says, Hope Davis has 44 toucans and 11 parrots. What is the ratio of the number of toucans to the number of parrots at Hope's house? So remember, order matters. The order that you write the ratio in matters. So if the question's asking what's the ratio of the number of toucans to the number of parrots, my answer must be in the correct order of toucans being first and parrots being the second quantity. So it says 44 toucans, 44, 2 parrots, which is 11. So my ratio is 44 to 11. So I'm going to look at my answer choices and try to find 44 to 11. Now, you might be a little bit perplexed, just like me, because I don't see that answer. And then I'm going to ask myself, why am I not seeing that answer? And when I look at both 44 and I look at 11, I realized that is because 44 and 11 are both multiples of 11, which means I can divide both 44 and 11 by 11. So what I'm doing here is I'm simplifying my ratio. And we can only simplify if we use the same number. I can't have 10 here and I can't have 11 here. You simplify using the same number. So 44 divided by 11 gets me 4. And 11 divided by 11 gets me 1. Now I'm going to look at my answer choices again, and I see that my correct answer is choice C. Choice A does look a little bit similar, and it does look a little bit tempting to answer, but the order of the ratio matters. This right here is actually the ratio of parrots to toucans. But like we read in the beginning, we want the ratio of toucans to parrots, excuse me. So this is why choice A would be incorrect. Let's go ahead and move on to number 6. Oops, why did it go backwards? Oh, 7, I'm sorry, forgot how to count. Okay, so it says there are 8 adults and 18 children at a science museum. What is the ratio of adults to total people at the science museum? There are 8 adults and 18 children at a science museum. What is the ratio of adults to total people at the science museum? So my two quantities that we're going to use to create the ratio are adults to total people. So I'm going to label right here, adults. Let me put it in the center. Adults to total people, P for people. So from the problem, it says there are 8 adults, and the amount of people there are is 26. Okay, there's a total of 26 people. And the way I got 26 was 8 plus 18 got me 26. Okay, because adults and children, when put together, are the total amount of people that we have at the museum. So 8 and 26 are my two answers. I don't see, excuse me, that's the two quantities. The 8 and 26 is the value of the two quantities, and that gives me the ratio of adults to total people, 8 to 26. Now, I don't see that answer choice here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify both of these values. I know that 8 and 26 can both be divided by 2 for the simple fact that they're both even numbers. 8 divided by 2 will get me 4. And 26 divided by 2 will get me 13. Okay? And can I divide 4 and 13 even more by the same number? Nope. They're not divisible by the same number. And when I look at my answer choices, I still don't see 4 to 13. The reason is when I changed, I made a mistake. When I changed the answers, when I changed the numbers for the practice test, I forgot to change the answer choices. So the answer is 4 to 13, I promise you, and none of these apply. But I will say, for when you take the actual test and you do this question, they say to select all that apply. So that means even though it's multiple choice, you're not going to only be picking one answer. You must pick two or more answers. You have to select all that apply. So you're not going to have just one answer. You're going to have multiple answers most likely. Let's go on to question number 8. It says a store had 27 sodas, both diet and regular. The ratio of diet sodas to regular sodas was 6-3. How many diet sodas were there? And what I will say, speaking of sodas, I got me some Taco Bell right here. This is Pepsi. So that's a perfect problem because it involves soda. So it says the store had 27 sodas, both diet and regular. So that's telling me that my two quantities are diet soda and regular soda. And like I had said before, I'm not going to be very picky on how you label it as long as your labels make sense. If you chose X and M, that's not going to make any sense. D makes sense for diet. R makes sense as a label for regular soda. It says the ratio was 6-3. Oh, let me do it with the tape diagram. Sorry. It says the ratio was 6-3, so I'm going to draw 6 pieces of tape next to diet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's 3 as part of the ratio for regular. And again, I know these tape pieces do not look the same, but I promise you they are equal. Okay? So it says the store had 27 sodas. So hold on. If it told us about how many diet sodas it had, we'd ignore the regular sodas and we'd only focus on the diet sodas. If it told us how many regular sodas we had, we'd ignore the diet soda tapes and we'd only focus on the regular tapes. But what it's telling us is how many sodas we had in total. The total would include both diet soda and regular soda. So we know that these pieces of tape together will get me 27. So what I need to ask myself is all these pieces of tape, when I add them together, that amount times what will get me 27. And I'm going to count the pieces of tape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 times what gets me 27? I need to know my 9 times table. And the answer to that is 3. And I'm going to change the color because I don't like this yellow. 3, 3, 3, 3. I'm sorry if this bothers you that it's coming out of the tape, but I should have done a better job and drawn the pieces of tape bigger. So each of these pieces represent 3. And something I noticed that a lot of you guys do is you end up, getting the 3 and then you think you're done and then you'll move on to the next problem. But you need to read what the problem's asking. The problem is asking you how many diet sodas were there. Okay? So what I need to do is I need to focus on just the diet soda pieces of tape. And I can add 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. But again, it's middle school. We want to try to multiply as much as we can. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of tape, my number sentence is going to be 6 times 3, which gets me 18. Very good. And that's going to be answer choice B. Okay? Let's go ahead and move on to number 9. So, number 9, let me change the color. Okay. Number 9 says Aaliyah Lewis likes to drink flavored water by adding flavor enhancers. It's like when you put the powder in your water bottle or whatever. She likes to mix half a teaspoon of flavored enhancer for every 6 fluid ounces of water. Below are several flavored water mixtures made by Aaliyah's friends. And that's what this ratio table shows us. Select all. That tells me that there'll be more than one answer that I'll be circling probably, of Aaliyah's friends who like the same ratio of water to flavor enhancer as her. So the first thing I'm going to do is in this problem, I see the two quantities are water and the amount of flavor. So but I'm going to do it in the order of this table. So the amount of flavor, which is the powder, and the amount of water. So what it's telling me is that the amount of flavor is going to be half a teaspoon. And it's also telling me that the amount of water is 6 fluid ounces. So every time Aaliyah pours half a teaspoon of whatever powder, there's going to be 6 fluid ounces of water. So every time she takes half a teaspoon of whatever flavor she puts, it could be like lemonade flavor, whatever, there will be 6 fluid ounces of water in her cup or her water bottle or whatever. So what we need to do is we need to look at all of Aaliyah's friends, Harry, Isabella, Jefferson, Kiara, Leo, and Martin, and see, are the ratios that her friends have equivalent or the same as the ratio that Aaliyah has? So in other words, are all of these, let me change the color, are all these ratios that we have here equivalent to the ratio half to 6, which is this ratio right here? So what I would do is I would take each of these ratios, and this is going to be a little bit time consuming, so don't be upset and don't be flustered or frustrated. I'm going to take each of these um, these ratios and put it into my ratio table. So I'm going to put 8 teaspoons of flavor and 128 fluid ounces of water, and I'm going to try to figure out, are these ratios equivalent? And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to ask myself, to get from half to 8, whatever I multiply or divide, am I doing the same thing to the other quantity? In this case, is the fluid ounces of water. So half times what gets me 8? So we're going to take a step back and we're going to try to remember what we learned in 5th grade about scaling and how that applies to multiplication. So let me change the color again. If I have the number 10 and I multiply it by 2, I'm making it 2 times greater. 10 times 2, two $10 bills, is 20. Okay? But if I change that times 2 to times half, instead of doubling it, I'm halving it. I'm making it half times greater. And I know it sounds weird to say half times greater when we're actually going to be getting a smaller number. So the way I like to think of it is that half is smaller than 1. So we're actually going to be, we're multiplying by half, which is going to make our answer smaller, but it's going to make it half as greater. So 10 times half, if I half 10, I'm going to end up getting 5. And this little concept right here is going to help us figure out how we would figure out what we're multiplying the 5 or the 0.5, the 5/10 by to get 8. So let me erase all that. Okay, so change the color. Okay, so half times what would get me 8? So what number would I have to slash in half to get me 8? And that's going to be 16. Because if I take 16 and I slash that by half, I get 8. And then I'm going to ask myself, if I multiply 6 by 16, will I get 128? And the answer to that is I will not, because 16 times 6 is 96. So I'm going to erase all that. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to cross out Harry. So that means the ratio that Aaliyah has, which is half to 6, is not equivalent to 8 to 128. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next ratio. Let me change the color. 6 to 72. So I'm going to ask myself, wait, let me change the color. I'm going to ask myself, half times what gets me 6? What number can I take? Can I slash it by half and get 6? So the answer is going to be 12. 12 times half gets me 6. If I take 12, if I slash it or half it, I will get 6. And if I multiply by 12 on one side, I have to do that to the other side. Is 6 times 12 72? It is 72. So that means the ratio that Aaliyah has, which is 1/2 to 6, is equivalent to the ratio that who's it? Isabella has, which is 6/72. So answer choice B is correct. But remember, guys, the question says to select all of Aaliyah's friends, which means that more likely than not, we're going to have multiple answers that we're going to have to select. Okay, because it says select all, which means we have to keep on doing the same work that we were doing. We have to figure out, is the ratio 1/2 to 6 equivalent to the rest of these ratios that are listed? So I'm going to go ahead and put the ratio of Jefferson, which is 5 teaspoons to 80 fluid ounces of water. Let me change the color again. Okay. So remember, what I do to one side or one quantity, I have to do to the other side in order to make sure they're equivalent ratios. And I also just want to say the ratio 1/2 to 6 is one ratio, and the ratio 5/80 is also a ratio. What we're trying to do is to determine if they're equivalent, if they're the same. And to figure that out, we have to make sure that they can both be multiplied by the same number, which means that they follow the same pattern. So half times what will get me 5? We kind of did this before. Half times 10. If I take 10 and I slash it, I get 5. So I have to do that to the other quantity, which is the water. 6 times 10 is not 80. 6 times 10 is 60. So that means Jefferson does not have a ratio that is equivalent to Aaliyah. So we're going to keep doing this, okay? So the ratio of flavor to water that Kiara has is 1/16. Let me change the color again. I'm going to ask myself, half times what gets me 1? What number can I slash in half that will get me 1? And the answer is 2. 2 times 1/2 gets me 1. And I have to do that to the other quantity, the other side, which is the water. 6 times 2, is that 16? It is not. So that means Kiara does not have a ratio that is equivalent to Aaliyah. Let's continue doing this. So even though, yes, it's a lot of work, it's not that bad because, well, it may be bad, but you still have to do it. It may not be bad if you get it right and then you get the points. But yeah, it is a lot of work and it is pretty time consuming. And it is kind of annoying doing it on Zoom right now as well. So I understand the struggle that you guys are going to have next week when you guys have your test. But anyways, so now I'm going to, oh, I already did Kiara also, my bad. Let's take a look at Leah. Changing the color. All right, so the ratio of flavor to water that Leo has is 4/64. That means every time Leo puts in 4 teaspoons of the powdered flavor, he has to have 64 fluid ounces of water. So what number will get me from, oh, hold on, let me change the color and do this. All right, so half times what will get me 4? So what number do I have to slash by half to get me 4? And that's going to be 8. And if I did that to this quantity, I have to do it to the other side or to the other quantity. 6 times 8 is 48. So that means the ratio that Aaliyah has is not equivalent to the ratio that Leo has. Okay? And now, last but not least, let's take a look at Marty. So it says the ratio of flavor to water that Marty has is 2/24. And I'm going to change the color again. And I'm going to ask myself, half times what gets me 2? So what number do I have to divide by half? Or excuse me, what number do I have to multiply by half to get me 2? And the answer is 4. Half times 4 gets me 2. And I'm going to do that to the other quantity as well to determine if they're equivalent or not. 6 times 4, is that 24? It is 24. So that means that the ratio of flavor to water that Marty has is equivalent to what Aaliyah has. okay, or the ratio that Aaliyah has. And I want to state one thing. 8 to 128, 6 to 72, 5 to 80, 1 to 16, 4 to 64, and 2 to 24. Those are all ratios. Those are all ratios. But the reason that Harry's ratio in this problem is incorrect, or Jefferson's ratio is incorrect, or Kiara and Leo's ratios are incorrect is because they're not equivalent to Aaliyah's ratio of 1/2 to 6. So these are indeed ratios. Whatever I crossed out, I crossed them out not because they're not ratios, I crossed them out because they're not equivalent ratios. So what I can say honestly is that 1/2 to 6, 6 to 72, and 2 to 24, and let me make sure I label flavor water. I can say that all of these ratios are equivalent. And I'm not going to spell it all out, so I'll just stop at equivalent. These three ratios are equivalent. That means they follow the same pattern. Every time I put 1/2 teaspoon of flavor, I have to have, or I have to, yeah, I have to have 6 fluid ounces of water in the water bottle. If I had 6 teaspoons of flavored water, I'd need 72 fluid ounces of water. So these are all equivalent ratios because when I looked at the way to get from one quantity to the next within the same quantity, I got you multiplied by the same number. Okay. So yes, this had like a lot of steps and we had to do a lot of work, but when you get full credit for this question, it'll definitely be worth it. Let's go on to number 10, and we're almost done. I think it's like 11 or 12 questions. So it says Victor Allen runs 5 meters every 2 seconds. How far does Victor run after 6 seconds? And how far does he run after 9 seconds? So when I look at the double number line, which is what this is, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to 6 seconds, which is right here. And I'm going to look up at meters because I see that these are equivalent ratios because of the way they're plotted. They're plotted right next to each other. Um, so in 6 seconds, he's able to run 12 meters. And remember to label it. And then it asks how many meters can he run in, or how far can he run in 9 seconds. And when I look up, I see it says 18, so 18 meters. Okay, so that was a quick one. Let's go on to number 11, clear. Okay. This one, if you're watching this over the weekend, we haven't learned it yet. We're going to learn this on Monday and Tuesday, which is pretty much it's combining graphing and it's combining ratio work. Okay. So it says it takes Miss Curitan about 2 minutes to walk 3 blocks. So right now I know there's a ratio because we have two quantities that are being compared, minutes to blocks, okay? And the actual numbers are written as well. So minutes to blocks. It takes her let me make the table look nicer. 2 minutes, 3 blocks. So every 2 minutes, she walks 3 blocks. So now it says a point has been plotted in the coordinate plane to represent this situation. And remember from 5th grade, the way we plot in a coordinate plane is we have to first plot along the x-axis before we plot along the y-axis. You always have to learn how to crawl before you learn how to fly high. You have to learn how to crawl before you can fly high. Okay? So we always plot along the x-axis, so that's why 2, 3 would be plotted as we start at the 0, 0, which is the origin. We go over 1, 2, and then the 3 would mean we go up the y-axis. 1, 1, 2, 3, and that's the 0.23. So it says plot a second point on the graph to the right. This is the graph that represents an equivalent ratio. So what this means is we can take the ratio 2, 3, which is minutes to blocks, and we can make any equivalent ratio that we'd like. Me personally, I like to use smaller numbers. So I'm going to multiply it by 2. So I'm going to multiply both sides, both quantities by 2. 2 times 2 will get me 4. 3 times 2 will get me 6. So what 4 to 6 represents is an equivalent ratio to 2 to 3. So that means if Miss Curitan walked for 2 minutes, she was able to walk like 3 blocks. If she walked for another 2 minutes, a total of 4 minutes, she would have walked for 6 blocks. So now I'm going to plot this 4, 6. Remember, I plot along the x-axis first and then the y. So I'm going to start at the origin at 0, 0. I'm going to go across 4, and then I'm going to go up 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I plot the number. Or I plot the point, excuse me, at 4, 6. So that's part A. For some reason, some people might think this is a multiple choice question and they'll just circle one and they'll think they got it right. And no, that tells me you didn't read it. And then if I asked you, hey, did you read the question? You're going to say yes. And I know you're going to be lying because this is not multiple choice. This is a two-step problem. First, or a two-part problem. First, we got to do part A, which we did. Now we need to explain what the coordinates of the point you plotted represent. And I kind of explained that. And thank God I just found the text tool so I could type in text. Okay, there we go. So explain what the coordinates of the point you plotted represent. So the coordinates of the point I plotted represents, what does 4, 6 represent? What does 4 to 6 represent? Represents the number of minutes it took Miss Curitan to walk 6 blocks. And the reason I know that is because I know that the value, or hold on, let me change the color. I know what 4 represents. It represents the quantity minutes. And I know what 6 represents. It represents the quantity blocks. So that's how I ended up writing, represents the number of minutes. Yeah, the number of minutes it took her to walk 6 blocks. Okay. And then I did part B. So I did both parts of this two-part problem. And now we're at the last question, which is question 12. So it says, let me change the color. It says Aaron Minity is making banana bread. The ratio of cups of mashed bananas to cups of flour for his recipe is 12 to 4. Aaron uses 6 cups of mashed bananas to make 1 loaf. 1 loaf. How many cups of flour will he use? Explain your answer using words and using numbers, words, and or pictures. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write the ratio 12 to 4. And I'm going to label what the 12 means and what the 4 means. So the 12, it says the ratio of cups of mashed bananas to cups of flour. So the 12 is the cups of bananas that are mashed, and the 4 represents the flour. Okay, so remember the order matters. So the 12 is first, so it represents the mashed bananas, and the 4 is second, and it represents the second quantity, which is the cups of flours. Now what the problem is telling us is that Aaron had used 6 cups of mashed bananas to make the loaf of bread. How many cups of flour will he use? So we don't know when he uses 6 cups of mashed bananas, how many cups of flour he will use. So that's going to be our mystery number, which in 6th grade we know we call a variable. A variable is a letter that represents an unknown number or a number, period. So I'm going to use B. And no, actually, I'm not going to use B. I'm going to use C. And I don't want to use B because actually, I'm not going to use C because C could confuse people with cups. What's the easy? Okay, I'll use H because there's really nothing here that has to do with the letter H. So I'm going to try to figure out how did I get from, let me change the color, from 12 to 6. What did I do to the 12 to get me 6? Now, yes, I subtracted by 6, but 6th grade, let's think about division. Let's think about multiplication. So to get from 12 to 6, I divided by 2. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side, I'm going to divide by 2 as well. So what I do to one quantity, what I did to the cups of mashed bananas, I have to do to the other quantity, which is the cups of flours. 4 divided by 2 will get me 2. And remember, you always, always, always have to label 2 cups. Okay? Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do it using another strategy, using the number line strategy, because why not? And well, okay, like in all seriousness, the reason we learn multiple strategies is so that we could check ourselves. So I'm going to use the double number line strategy. And if you do use a second strategy on the test, I'll give you guys maybe like a bonus point or 2 for doing that. So I drew my 2 number lines. I'm going to label it bananas, cups of flour. I'm going to start by putting the ratio of mashed bananas to cups of flour, which is 12 to 4, 12, 4. Then it tells me that Aaron used 6 cups of mashed bananas. I'm going to plot 6. How many cups of flour will he use? So I don't know what that is. That's the variable h, right? So how do I get from 12 to 6? I divide by 2. So then I have to do the same thing to the bottom. 4 divided by 2, and that will get me 2 cups specifically. Okay? Now, a common mistake people make, and I was just about to make that mistake because I am exhausted this evening, is we have 2 parts to this problem as well. This is not multiple choice. So we just did part A and we got 2 cups. We're now going to do part B. So in order to do part B, you have to have done part A and you have to get it correct. I will say that if I notice like a little small mistake that you made in part A, like if it was a multiplication error or something, and you use that for part B, I won't take off a lot of points, I promise. So it says Eric Nunez uses Alan's, it should say Aaron, but I, changed the names up. Aaron's recipe to make banana bread. Eric uses 8 cups of flour, and it should say 18 also, by the way. 18 cups of flour in total. How many loaves does Eric make? So what we need to figure out here is what are the 2 quantities of our ratio. So let me change the color again. So he's making banana bread. Cups of flour is going to be 1 quantity to loaves. So flour to loaves. Okay. So do we know what the ratio of flour to loaves is? Like I said, we need to use part A. So from part A, we know that the ratio is 2 cups of flour in 1 loaf. Because remember, we were in part A, it said that we had 6 cups of mashed bananas that made 1 loaf. And then we were able to figure out how many cups of flour that Aaron would use, right? So now we're using that answer to figure out the answer for part B. So you need to be careful and make sure that you're doing both parts with as much diligence and effort as you could. Because if you get part A wrong, you'll get part B wrong. So 2 cups of flour for 1 loaf of bread or of banana bread. And now what the problem is saying is Eric used 18 cups of flour. So how many loaves did he make? So we don't know the number of loaves. We're going to use a variable. We'll use the variable z. A variable is a letter that represents a number. So how did I get from 2 to 18? I multiplied by 9. We did that to the first quantity, which is cups of flours, and now we need to do that to the other quantity, which is loaves of bread. 1 times 9 is 9. Z is 9, and we have to be specific by using units. 9 loaves. You could write loaves of bread. I am not doing that because it's very hard to write on Z. Okay? So those are the 12 questions that you guys are going to have on the test. What I will say is this week in class, if you have questions, please ask, don't be scared and don't hesitate to ask them, and I will do my best to answer them. And with that being said, remember to hit that like button, remember to subscribe, remember to hit that bell notification, and if there are any questions that you're having trouble with and it's Wednesday night, which is the day before the test, you can feel free to, email me. You could leave a comment and then I'll get an email that, someone left a comment, or you could use your parent or grown-up's phone to text me with their permission, of course. Okay. Or you could also message me with your parents' permission on the Band app as well that Ms. Curitan was telling you guys about on Friday. Okay, so good luck. Remember, this test is 45% of your grade, so you want to do well on this test. And, definitely use your notes, and you guys are going to do great on this test. Have a nice day, or night, or weekend, depending on when you're watching this. Bye, guys.